Making a crossover game involves taking a lot of ideas. You're pulling from everything you can, or at least everything that works, and that's sort of weird. It's an odd way to think about creating art, and it's important that any crossover gives as much as it takes and puts new ideas into the world. Super Smash Bros. Is hardly alone in this, with perhaps its greatest example coming in its third game. Enter Pit. Like the Ice Climbers before him, Pit was brought into Super Smash Bros. Brawl to fill the role of a retro fighter. Unlike them, he was rather famous. Kid Icarus, his starring role, was a big part of the NES lineup, big enough to warrant him starring in a god-awful television crossover. And though the only follow-up he ever got was a Game Boy sequel that didn't even release in Pit's own home country, he remained fairly iconic in the years since. He was the one that got away, which gave him a certain value amongst Nintendo fans. The company has oodles of retro characters, but Pit had a narrative. He was still a character from only 2 games, only one of which mattered and both of which were over 20 years old. He needed a redesign, new moves, and a look that spoke to a late-aughts audience, because this doesn't exactly look right. Plenty of fighters are built to accommodate issues like this, of course, and plenty of them to a major degree. Fox was made to represent an attitude, the Ice Climbers a mechanical concept, and Mario a brand. So what was the ethos behind Pit's changes? According to a presentation Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai gave on Brawl at GDC 2008, the game's staff tried to envision a world where Kid Icarus had spawned a major franchise. Kid Icarus and The Legend of Zelda came out the same year, and while the former languished, the latter only evolved and evolved. Even though Link's almost always had the tunic and the hat and the boomerang, he's become so much more. That's natural, and in 2005, when Brawl started development, 19 years and a dozen mainline Zelda games made that very clear. So if Link changed over the course of those years, how would Pit have changed? That's the basis of his identity in Smash: speculation. Let's start with the look. The original Pit was a perfectly fine NES character, but he'd probably be a bit too slow and subdued for a series as loud as Smash. So, time for a redesign. Pit was now taller, with longer legs, bigger wings, and more energetic proportions. His face looked more youthful. To a degree, some fans derided as anime. Shorts and an undershirt gave him a bit more modesty, but they also looked like exercise gear. This was a Pit that was ready to run and lift and bench. He'd fit perfectly into Link's then latest adventure. Several design choices also distinguish him on the battlefield. His armbands, bow, and laurel aren't just gold, they straight up glow. The ornamentation, beyond looking like the prize from some wild quest we can only imagine, helps make his design pop just a bit. They also make him easier to see in a fight. The same is true of his new wings, which, unlike original Pit's puny fins, you can see from a distance. For the most part, these do go away a bit from the crypto-Greek design of the original game. The only Hellenic thing that's added are some arch designs on his garters. But that actually follows the nature of Kid Icarus, which goofed around with Greek mythology. The game had Medusa and Thanatos and a character based on Pallas Athena, but it also had floating Groucho Marx glasses and the Eggplant Wizard. It feels very plausible that this Pit could have existed had he gotten the chance to have his own A Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time. Pit's fighting style, which was at the time nothing more than shooting tiny arrows and wielding a hammer, badly needed an upgrade too. He felt weak and underpowered in his own game by design. That was for the sake of difficulty and dark comedy. Smash could have probably been fine with him shooting various types of arrows or punching, but in a stroke of mad genius, the team decided to turn his bow into a multi-purpose weapon. It's a rather brilliant idea, really. The Palutena bow becomes 2 daggers Pit can split apart, letting him swiftly dual-wield blades. He can even stick them together in a way that lets them spin like a fan. The trick's so nice it got turned into a special move and can be found all over his moveset. The bow is entirely different from any other Smash fighter, and it's quite stylish to boot. And as a neat bonus, its focus on sideways and upward attacks also replicate how Pit fires arrows in his original game. Homage or just good fighter design. It actually puts his other artifacts from Kid Icarus, his Mirror of Truth, Free Flying, and Armada of Centurions, to shame. They're slightly old and crude, though I don't think that's a bad thing. And they don't keep Pit from feeling fast, energetic, and young. Some of Smash's retro characters are meant to seem like curios from another time, but not this one. Pit doesn't come across as a relic or archaic, in keeping with the ethos of his redesign. He's filled with vitality. Smash added a lot, and it turned an older hero into something more modern, more acceptable in the 2000s market. And that ended up leaking back into Kid Icarus itself. Sakurai rebooted the series in 2012 with Kid Icarus Uprising, using Pit's redesign as a baseline. And Uprising is as imaginative and additive as Pit's redesign was. It's bursting with a wealth of new ideas, almost as though we got a game straight from that universe where Kid Icarus was a big deal. So when it was time to bring Pit back into the fold in Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, those new ideas that could have only happened with Pit's Brawl appearance, were incorporated. The Angel Ring, Mirror of Truth, and Wings of Icarus were replaced by new specials, which mostly did the same thing, but in an appropriately newer, kickier way. The Angel's Blah Final Smash turned from a stodgy platoon to a crazed array of light blasts, which itself was replaced again by the next game. And Pit's new personality, which is to say, an actual personality built by a real narrative arc, was everywhere. Pit laughs, he makes awful jokes, he gets demeaned in public by his boss. And coming with that was a new fighter, an extension of one of Brawl's true success stories. If Pit was going to evolve in the way his more popular Nintendo relatives did, he was going to need an edgy, dark counterpart. Link has a Dark Link, Samus a Dark Samus, and Mario at least 3 just off the top of my head. And one of Pit's costumes in Brawl made a nod to this, a fallen angel color scheme in the parlance of Sakurai. So in Uprising, Pit got his own, just like you, but evil rival. In keeping with the game's jokey, frenetic tone, Dark Pit's a loosely pasticed Shadow the Hedgehog type, self-conscious and repeatedly mocked, but violent enough to be a threat. He was also Pit's clone, and by extension, an easy choice for an alternate costume. Smash 4 was experimenting with that. There were options to play as male or female versions of characters, and some fighters had entirely new characters in the place of a color variation. That was his role. However, Sakurai found it weird for Dark Pit to share Pit's upbeat animations in Final Smash. It probably was weird. Splitting him off was easy. Lucina had already been upgraded from Marth's costume to a separate character. Dark Pit could differentiate himself slightly with a new electroshock arm that had been planned for one of Pit's custom moves. Given how little time it takes to make a clone character, and that Pit already has a low learning curve, it was a sensible move. Sensible, but not popular. Dark Pit was reasonably requested in the lead-up to Smash 4's launch, but people tended to imagine him using his Dark Pit staff, which is important enough to be in not only his final Smash, but his character art for both Smash appearances, or relegated to just the costume. The absence of several beloved fighters, his being one of 3 full-on clone characters after a game that did more to distinguish its clones, and an accusation of favoritism in Sakurai's roster hurt him with fans. I kind of wondered how Dark Pit would have been received if he debuted just one game later in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as an Echo Fighter. Maybe he'd have been viewed as a smart choice, a spin-off of a popular and easy-to-use fighter. It's a needlessly academic question without any real answer, but perhaps. Something I feel more confident about Dark Pit is that he feels like a natural, perhaps inevitable stop in Pit's story. Kid Icarus was a popular, painfully difficult game that never capitalized on its own success. After years of being established as a classic, it finally got a chance to show itself in Nintendo's fancy crossover, one far better at reaping its own acclaim. And it didn't just come in with all its history, it got a new and radical interpretation. Then, that interpretation became a reboot, grabbing even more of Kid Icarus, but still adding a torrent of new ideas. And now we have a fighter born not just of this reimagining, but the ideas that led to it. All of this is a testament to the Smash development team's ability to create smart interpretations of its source material. As the second newcomer revealed for Brawl, Pit was given plum spots on the cover and promotional material. Perhaps a flying angel showed off Brawl's emphasis on sky and breath. But he's kept getting them over older veterans or established mascots. I think that's a fair place for him. He's far from the only Smash Bros. Fighter who's greatly reimagined, but he's arguably the best example of how those reimaginings can go beyond Smash itself. If Kid Icarus ever returns, it'll likely draw from the work Brawl did, and that means a lot. Thanks for watching. I'm Wolfman on Script and Mic, with script edits by AShadowLink, and footage and editing courtesy of NantenJex. For Dark Pit's fellow Echo Fighters, some of them will be mixed in with their originals, and some will get their own videos. If you like this video and would like more like this, I'd like to gently advertise our Patreon. The link to our page is in the description. To our Patreons, the ones you can see on screen, we'd like to give a special thanks. And remember to return to the source.